It was the kind of message that made your heart freeze in the middle of a breath. One text. A single line of words. And suddenly, everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. I was standing in the kitchen when the notification popped up on my phone. My husband, Mike, was out in the yard, doing whatever he did in the afternoons after work. I hadn't heard from him much today, just the usual routine of a few brief texts, asking about dinner plans. But this message, came from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it. Some part of me knew something wasn't right, but it's the kind of thing you ignore. That is, until curiosity takes over. The message read, "You might want to know what he's been up to. This is Emma. We need to talk." I stood there, staring at the words, the weight of them pressing down on my chest. Emma. Who the hell was Emma? I thought I knew everything about my husband. Every corner of our life together felt so solid, so safe, like a house built on unshakable foundations. But this was like a crack that spread, threatening to bring it all tumbling down. It wasn't even the name that struck me the hardest. It was the tone. There was something so final about it, like she was offering me some unspoken truth. A truth that had been hidden behind every laugh we shared, every dinner we ate, every day that passed. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to pretend I didn't see it, pretend I never even got the message. But I couldn't. I couldn't look away. And then, in that moment, I knew. My life, as I knew it, was about to change forever. Mike and I had been together for almost 12 years. It hadn't always been perfect. No relationship is. There were the ups and downs, the normal stuff. But we had a rhythm. We were a team, or so I thought. It wasn't a glamorous love story, but it was ours. We met in college. I was a sophomore, and he was the quiet, brooding guy who didn't seem to care much about the social scene. I liked that about him. He made me feel safe in a world that was always spinning too fast. We got married 3 years after we graduated. The wedding was simple, but beautiful. My mom made her famous roast chicken, and Mike's dad cried when they played that slow song about forever. We moved into a small house, nothing fancy, but it was cozy. Over the years, we filled it with the little things that made it ours: family pictures, the smell of fresh coffee in the mornings, his old guitar gathering dust in the corner. Life wasn't perfect, but it was steady. I worked as a teacher at the local high school, and Mike was in IT, handling everything from systems management to troubleshooting. His hours were long, but he made up for it in other ways. He was thoughtful, always sending me sweet messages when I was grading papers, picking up my favorite flowers on his way home, even when I was too tired to appreciate it. Our lives were built on the small, steady moments. The kind of love that grows not from grand gestures, but from the quiet things: folding laundry together, cooking dinner side by side, the soft sound of his breath next to me in bed at night. I never once doubted his loyalty, until now. There were times when things felt a little too routine, when I wondered if we were both just going through the motions, but we always seemed to find our way back to each other. Maybe that's why, when things started to feel off, I didn't question it immediately. I told myself it was just a phase, just the weight of our busy lives catching up with us. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed, little things, like how he'd started coming home later and later, how he'd get these distant looks when we were talking, like his mind was somewhere else. I'd ask him if something was wrong, and he'd brush it off, saying he was just stressed. I believed him, because I wanted to. That's the thing about trust, it's easy to overlook the cracks when you want to believe everything is still intact. And I wanted to believe. It started small. The first real sign came one evening when Mike's phone rang while we were having dinner. I remember the sound of it vibrating against the table, the way it seemed louder than it should have been. He'd glanced at the screen and let it ring out without answering. It wasn't unusual for him to let calls go to voicemail, but this time, there was something different about the way he looked at it. His eyes lingered on the screen for just a moment too long. I didn't say anything then, but it nagged at me. Something about it felt wrong. A few days later, I was putting laundry away when I saw his phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a notification. It wasn't anything scandalous, just a message from his work group chat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Later that week, I asked him if he had plans for the weekend. It was rare for us to have a full day without anything to do, and I thought maybe we could take a break, go for a drive, and just enjoy each other's company. He told me he had to work, that he was swamped with deadlines. But when I looked in his eyes as he said it, I noticed something. The flicker. The hesitation. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. I didn't push him about it. I wanted to trust him, and part of me believed he was just overwhelmed with work. I could see how stressed he was, after all. But the nagging feeling didn't go away. And then, one night, it happened. Mike had gone to bed early, leaving his phone on the counter in the kitchen. I walked past it, distracted by the pile of dishes I'd yet to clean. My hand brushed against it as I reached for the sink, and without thinking, I picked it up. There was a new message. A text from someone named Emma. It wasn't the name that stopped me, it was the message itself. Just wanted to check in. Can't wait to see you again. We'll make sure he never finds out. I froze. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront him? Should I pretend I never saw it? But it was too late. I had seen it. And now, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the words from that message haunted me. We'll make sure he never finds out. The thought of Mike, the man I thought I knew inside and out, being involved with someone else shattered my perception of everything. How could I not have known? How long had this been going on? Had I really been so blind, so wrapped up in the day-to-day that I missed the signs? By morning, I was running on fumes, my mind racing with 1,000 questions and no answers. Mike woke up as usual, kissed me on the cheek, and asked if I wanted coffee. I could hardly look at him. The man I had trusted with everything, my love, my life, my future, was hiding something from me. He left for work, as he always did, with a kiss and a promise to be home by dinner. The kitchen was still, too quiet. I felt like I was drowning in silence, the weight of what I knew pressing down on me. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to know. I grabbed his phone while I was still in the kitchen. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I was on the verge of discovering something I couldn't take back. The messages were there, too many to ignore. There were text threads that went back months, maybe longer. Conversations that seemed innocent at first glance, but the more I read, the more my stomach turned. Plans to meet up. Inside jokes I didn't understand. Words of affection that should have been mine. And then I saw it, the message that made everything feel real. It was from Emma, and it said, "I miss you so much. When will you be back in town? I've been counting down the days." It hit me like a slap in the face. Emma wasn't just a friend, or a colleague, she was someone he had been seeing behind my back. Someone he'd been lying to me about all along. Tears blurred my vision as I read the messages over and over. Each word cut deeper than the last. I wanted to scream, to shout, to confront him right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence swallow me whole, numb to the pain, unable to process the betrayal that had just been laid bare in front of me. I couldn't keep this to myself. I needed to confront him. But how? What would I say? What could I possibly say to make sense of the lies that had been built between us? I waited for him to come home, the anticipation eating away at me. When Mike walked through the door that evening, everything felt different. The air in the house was thick with unspoken tension. I could hear the soft click of the door closing behind him, the sound of his shoes on the floor. He walked toward the kitchen, where I was sitting, his usual easy smile already on his face. "Hey, babe," he said, dropping his bag on the counter. "How was your day?" I looked up at him, my heart beating so loudly in my chest I thought he could hear it. "Who is Emma?" I asked, my voice steady but strained. The question hung in the air, heavier than anything I'd ever asked him before. For a moment, there was no response. No movement. He stood there, frozen, his face draining of color. I saw his eyes flicker to the side, like he was searching for a way out of the truth. But there was no escape now. "Emma," he repeated, his voice too casual. "What are you talking about?" I didn't give him a chance to dodge the question. "The text messages, Mike. From Emma. The ones you've been sending her for months." I could see the panic in his eyes now. He reached for his phone, but I was faster. I grabbed it from the counter and held it up, showing him the messages. He took a step back, and for a moment, I thought he was going to run. His expression was a mix of guilt and disbelief, like he couldn't believe I had found out. Like he thought he could hide it forever. "Please, listen," he started, but I cut him off. "No. Don't try to explain, Mike. I saw everything. All those late nights, all those times you said you were working late. You were with her, weren't you?" He opened his mouth to speak again, but there were no words that could fix this. No excuse that could make the lies disappear. "I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking. "How could you do this to me? To us?" He sank into a chair, his hands rubbing his face. "I didn't want to hurt you. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I wanted to scream at him, but instead, I just sat there, holding his phone in my hands like a weapon. I felt so small, so foolish, so utterly betrayed. "Did you love her?" I asked, the words coming out in a whisper. For a moment, he didn't answer. I didn't need him to. I knew the truth already. "Yes," he said, finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I loved her. But it didn't mean anything. It was just a mistake. A mistake. That's what it had been. A mistake that had torn everything apart." The days that followed were a blur. We didn't talk much. When we did, it was about the house, about logistics, about what to do next. There was no room for us to talk about us. The love I thought we shared felt like a lie, and I couldn't bring myself to pretend anymore. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my friends, not my family. But as the days passed, the pain became too much to keep inside. I needed someone to hear me, someone who could help me understand how I got here. I confided in my sister, Rachel. She was the first person who knew about the affair, the first person who saw how badly this had crushed me. She listened quietly, offering only the occasional word of comfort. And when I told her about Emma, Rachel's face turned hard. "He'll never get away with this," she said, her eyes burning with righteous anger. "You deserve better than him." It was strange, how the people around me seemed to feel the hurt just as much as I did. But they weren't the ones living in the house with the ghost of his betrayal haunting every room. They weren't the ones having to look at the man who had torn apart everything they thought they knew. Word got out, of course. My friends started to ask questions. Mike tried to keep it under wraps, but rumors have a way of slipping through cracks. The truth came out. Slowly, but surely. And with it came the consequences. He lost some friends, some business connections, all of whom had their own opinions about his actions. Some were sympathetic, others, less so. But through it all, I held my ground. I wasn't going to let this tear me apart any more than it already had. It's strange, the way time can heal wounds you never thought you'd survive. In the weeks after everything came to light, I felt like I was walking through a fog. It was hard to remember what normal even felt like. My life, the one I'd built with Mike, seemed to unravel at the edges every time I tried to hold it together. I stayed in the house for a while after Mike moved out, even though every corner seemed to echo with memories of him. It wasn't the house that was the problem, it was the silence. The absence of a future that I thought was already set. The space where his presence used to fill everything. I spent more time with my sister, Rachel. She became my anchor, helping me put one foot in front of the other. And I started to reclaim pieces of my life that I hadn't even realized I'd lost. Little things. Things that had once seemed so insignificant. I spent afternoons gardening, something I hadn't done since I'd first met Mike. I took long walks in the park and let myself feel the cool breeze on my face without thinking about what was wrong. And slowly, I began to remember who I was before I was someone's wife. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to scream, when I wanted to crumble into the darkness of what had happened. There were moments when I felt like the betrayal was still suffocating me. But there were other days, too. Days when the weight felt a little lighter, when I caught myself smiling without realizing it. I started therapy after Rachel insisted. I wasn't sure about it at first. I'd always been the kind of person to deal with things quietly, to suffer in silence. But talking to someone who wasn't a part of my life, who didn't know the details of the betrayal, helped. It gave me a space to process my emotions without judgment. Mike tried to contact me a few times. At first, I ignored him completely. I couldn't face him, not yet. But then, one evening, he showed up at the door, unannounced. His face was weary, drawn, and the guilt in his eyes was so obvious, it almost hurt to look at. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I never meant to hurt you." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to tell him exactly how much he'd hurt me, to make him feel the full weight of his actions. But another part of me knew that would never bring back what we had. I had to choose my peace over the anger. "I don't want to hear your excuses," I said, finally, my voice calm but firm. "What you did can't be undone. But I've moved on from you." It wasn't a confrontation I had expected, but it was the one I needed. It was the first step in truly letting go. I needed to take back control over my life, over my happiness. He nodded, looking defeated. "I understand," he said quietly. And with that, he left. After that, there were no more visits, no more messages. I closed the door on that chapter of my life. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like my chest was being crushed by his lies. I focused on healing. I surrounded myself with people who cared about me. I went on dates with myself, reconnecting with the things I loved. I remembered what it felt like to laugh again, to wake up without a knot in my stomach. Slowly, the woman I had been before Mike, before the betrayal, started to emerge. It's been months now, and while I still have moments of doubt, moments when I question whether I did the right thing, I know one thing for sure: I am stronger than I was before. I've learned the hard way that trust is a fragile thing, but so is the human spirit. We are capable of healing, of rebuilding, even after our world has been shattered. If there's anything I've learned through this experience, it's that you can't allow someone's betrayal to define you. You have to take the pieces, the broken fragments of your life, and start putting them back together, slowly, but surely. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe someday I'll be ready for love again. Maybe I won't. But for now, I'm content with rediscovering who I am and what I want out of life. I'm at peace with myself. And that's enough. So, I ask you, have you ever had to pick up the pieces of your own heart after someone you loved broke it? How did you heal? I'd love to hear your stories. Share them with me in the comments below. And if you've been through something similar, know that you're not alone. The days that followed Mike's departure felt like a blur. The world outside kept spinning, as it always does, while inside, I struggled with the debris of my broken marriage. It wasn't just the idea of Mike having betrayed me, it was everything that came with it. The trust one thought I had, the future I imagined we would share, and the years of memories that now seemed tainted by lies. I found myself in the middle of conversations where I was physically present, but mentally, I was somewhere else entirely. I would hear people talk about their partners, their families, their plans, and I would smile and nod, but it all felt distant. I wanted to scream, to tell them that not everything was as perfect as it appeared, that sometimes the person you trust the most can shatter your world without warning. The silence in the house was the hardest part. I remember the evenings when I would sit on the couch, a book in my lap, but unable to read a single word. The light from the kitchen would flicker in through the doorway, casting long shadows on the walls. It felt so empty, so hollow, like a home that had lost its warmth. And then, the questions would creep in again. Had I really been blind to the signs? Was I so caught up in the comfort of our routine that I couldn't see what was right in front of me? Did I miss the way he stopped looking at me the way he once did, or the way his smile seemed to fade over time? And Emma, how long had she been a part of this hidden life? But every time the questions came, I would remind myself of something crucial: it didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was how I moved forward. I couldn't keep looking backward at the past, at the man who no longer existed in the way I had thought. So I did what any woman trying to heal does: I kept going. I got up every day, even when it felt impossible, even when my heart felt like it was breaking in a million different ways. I learned how to breathe through the pain, to let myself feel it without letting it swallow me whole. And then, something unexpected happened. I think the turning point for me came when I finally allowed myself to lean on my family. Rachel had always been my pillar, but even she knew that I needed more. My parents had always been a little distant, more concerned with appearances than emotions, but my mom, especially, was different. She had always been a quiet observer, someone who never meddled in my life but was always there when I needed her. One evening, after a particularly rough week, she came over. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea and staring blankly at the window. The storm clouds had rolled in again, and I could hear the rain tapping against the glass. She walked in, her hands in her pockets, and without a word, sat across from me. I wasn't surprised when she reached over and held my hand. "You've been through a lot," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But you're stronger than you think." I didn't speak at first. I didn't know what to say. How could I even begin to express everything that had shattered inside me? But my mom didn't need words. She understood, perhaps more than anyone else. "People make mistakes," she continued. "But that doesn't define you. You're not a victim here, darling. You're a survivor. And you'll rise above this, I know you will." Those words, simple as they were, became the first step toward my healing. I wasn't a victim of Mike's betrayal. I wasn't going to let his choices dictate my happiness. It was time to start seeing myself as someone who was capable of overcoming this, someone who could rebuild, not for anyone else, but for me. It wasn't easy. The struggle to let go of the hurt and anger wasn't something that could be done in a day or even a month. It came in waves, and sometimes, those waves knocked me down hard. There were nights when I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversations with Mike, wondering if I'd made the right decision. I kept asking myself, should I forgive him? Could I? I remembered the man I had loved, his laugh, his kindness, his touch. But I also remembered the lies, the betrayal. I remembered the loneliness I had felt in the midst of our marriage, the way he would come home late, the way his eyes always seemed somewhere else. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer lightly. It wasn't a decision I could make just to heal myself. It had to come naturally, and I wasn't sure if it ever would. For a long time, I held on to the thought that forgiveness was necessary, but what I came to realize was that my peace, my true peace, didn't require him to be forgiven. It required me to let go of the bitterness that was slowly consuming me. I didn't need closure from him. I needed closure from myself. I started distancing myself from the idea of what should have been. I stopped imagining that we could have fixed things. I accepted that Mike's choices had led him down a path I could no longer walk with him. And in that acceptance, I found a kind of freedom. One afternoon, about 6 months after everything came to light, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the woman who had been devastated by betrayal. It wasn't the woman who cried herself to sleep or wondered where things had gone wrong. No, the woman I saw now was someone stronger, someone who had weathered the storm and come out the other side. I had scars, emotional ones, certainly, but they were part of me now. They had shaped me into someone new. Someone resilient. Someone who had learned how to stand tall, even when life knocked me down. And that was the moment when I finally understood. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It wasn't about pretending that everything was fine. It was about accepting that life had unfolded the way it had, and that I was capable of moving forward, stronger, wiser, and more in control than ever before. The weeks turned into months, and each day felt like a little victory. I had my good days, and I had my bad ones, but with each passing day, I grew more certain of the path I was carving for myself. The emotional haze of the first few months began to clear, and I started to see things with new clarity. I found myself reconnecting with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. People who had known me before Mike, before marriage, before all the things that changed. They reminded me of the person I had been, the one who laughed without a care in the world, the one who loved without fear. It felt good to laugh again. It felt good to be reminded that I was still me, underneath all the hurt. I began to take care of myself in ways I hadn't in years. I went for long walks, spent time reading books that had been collecting dust on the shelf, and even started practicing yoga. I had forgotten how much I loved to move my body, how it felt to stretch and breathe and just be. More importantly, I started to rebuild my trust in myself. In the past, I had leaned on Mike for everything, for validation, for love, for direction. But now, I realized I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I was enough, just as I was. I wasn't broken. I was simply healing. There were moments of doubt, yes. There were times when I'd wonder if I'd ever find love again. Would I ever be able to trust someone the way I had trusted Mike? Would I ever allow myself to be vulnerable again? But with every question, I found an answer. With every scar, I found a lesson. I wasn't the same woman I had been when I married Mike. I was stronger, more self-aware, and more at peace with who I was. As the months went by, I began to think about the future, not in terms of what I had lost, but in terms of what was still possible. I thought about traveling, about living for myself. I had dreams I'd put on hold for years, dreams that didn't involve anyone else, just me and the world ahead of me. I started making plans again, and it felt good. I found joy in the little things, eating dinner without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me, laughing without guilt, sleeping soundly without a sense of dread. And, surprisingly, I found myself thinking about Mike less and less. He was a chapter in my life, yes, but that chapter was closing, and I was ready for the next one. It wasn't about erasing him, but about acknowledging that it was over. The person I had once loved wasn't the same man anymore, and I wasn't the same woman. I think the most liberating realization was that I didn't need a man to complete me. I never did. I was enough on my own, just as I had been before I met Mike. My life was mine to shape, mine to live. It wasn't just trust in myself that I had to rebuild, it was trust in others. In the beginning, I was terrified of letting anyone close again. The thought of opening up to someone, of allowing myself to be vulnerable, seemed like an impossible task. How could I trust again after everything that had happened? But as I worked on myself, I also began to realize that not everyone was like Mike. Not everyone would betray me. Not everyone would lie or deceive. I met new people along the way. Slowly, I started to form new friendships, ones that were built on honesty and respect. It wasn't about rushing into anything or pretending I wasn't scared. It was about taking small steps and learning to trust again, one day at a time. And one day, I found myself smiling at someone without the shadows of doubt or fear. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could allow myself to open up again. It wasn't about replacing Mike, it was about accepting that the future could hold something different, something better. A few months after Mike's departure, I received another message from him. It wasn't a text this time, but an email, long and filled with apologies. In it, he wrote about how much he regretted his actions, how he was still in therapy, trying to work through his issues. He said he wanted to see me again, to explain himself, to make things right. But I had already made my decision. I didn't need his explanations anymore. I didn't need to hear the words he was offering me. What I needed was closure, and that had already been given to me through my own actions. I was moving forward, not back. I took a deep breath before I replied. I was calm, surprisingly calm, considering how much he had hurt me. I've moved on, Mike. I hope you find the peace you're looking for, but I'm not the one who can give it to you. I wish you well. I hit send and felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't about anger, and it wasn't about revenge. It was simply about taking back control over my own life. As I entered this new chapter of my life, it felt like every small moment was filled with meaning. The world around me seemed to slow down, allowing me to savor the things I had been too distracted to notice before. There were quiet mornings when the only sound was the distant chirp of birds outside, and I would sit with my cup of tea, watching the steam rise, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. It was in these small moments of stillness that I realized how much I had been neglecting myself in the past. I'd always prided myself on being self-sufficient, but for too long, I had lived for the needs of others. My marriage had become a space where my identity was constantly shaped by what Mike needed, what Mike wanted. In the chaos of keeping everything running smoothly, keeping up appearances, managing a home, juggling work, I had lost touch with the things that made me me. I started to rediscover those things, slowly. I began painting again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I dug out the old set of watercolors Mike had bought me years ago and started to experiment with colors and shapes, not caring what anyone thought, just letting the brush move freely. There was something cathartic about it, about taking control over a blank canvas, just like I was taking control of my life. I also reconnected with old passions, things I had forgotten in the rush of my marriage. I joined a local hiking group and spent weekends exploring the trails I had once loved. It wasn't just the physical exercise that helped, it was the silence of the mountains, the vastness of the sky above, reminding me of how small I was in the grand scheme of things, and yet, how powerful I could be when I reclaimed my own strength. And then there was the peace that began to grow inside me. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't constant, but it was there. The anger, the resentment that had once burned hot inside me, began to smolder out. I learned to accept the truth, that Mike had made his choices, and now I had to make mine. He couldn't take away my peace unless I allowed it. As the months passed, I began to open myself up to the possibility of new connections. Not romantic relationships, no, that was still too raw, but friendships. genuine ones. Ones that didn't come with expectations or hidden agendas. Rachel was, of course, still my closest confidant, but I also began to spend more time with people who didn't know my past, who didn't judge me or pity me. There was a woman I met at the hiking group, Emma, no, not that Emma, but a kindred spirit who had walked through her own struggles and came out the other side with a quiet, graceful strength. We had long conversations after our hikes, talking about life, the world, and what it meant to heal. There was also Peter, a friend from my art classes. He was older than me and had a gentle, calm presence about him. He never rushed me into anything, always giving me space to open up at my own pace. Slowly, I began to trust again, just a little, and found myself letting people into my life, on my terms. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. And though I had no intentions of diving into anything romantic, there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when I found myself feeling the stirrings of attraction towards someone new. It was a strange feeling, something I hadn't felt in years. But there was no pressure, no rush. I was learning to appreciate my own company before I could ever give myself fully to another person. It was an evening much like any other when I received the phone call. My phone rang, and I glanced at the screen. It was an unfamiliar number. At first, I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. But then I answered, curiosity getting the best of me. "Hello?" I said, my voice steady but cautious. "Hi, is this Sarah?" The voice on the other end was tentative, uncertain. It was a woman's voice, unfamiliar yet oddly familiar at the same time. "Yes, this is Sarah." "Who's this?" There was a slight pause before she spoke again. "My name's Emma." The name hit me like a bolt of lightning. I felt my stomach twist, my breath catching in my throat. My hand tightened around the phone as I sat down at the kitchen table. "Mike's Emma?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she replied, her voice quiet now. "I know this is probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to apologize. I never meant for things to get so messy. I never meant to hurt you." Her words were like a strange mixture of relief and guilt. I didn't know whether I should feel anger or sympathy. I didn't know what to say. "What do you want from me?" I asked, trying to keep my emotions in check. I had no interest in reopening old wounds, but at the same time, part of me wanted to hear her side. Part of me needed to understand how we had all gotten tangled in this mess. "I just wanted you to know that I never meant for things to happen this way," Emma continued, her voice more vulnerable now. "I was in love with him, but I also knew what it would cost. I should have walked away, but I didn't. And I'm sorry. For everything. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I regret it all." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to shout at her, to ask her how she could have done this to me. But another part of me understood. I realized that there was no point in holding on to anger toward her. She wasn't the one who had made the vows to me. She wasn't the one who had lied, who had betrayed me. She was just another person who had gotten caught up in the mess that was Mike's choices. "I appreciate you calling," I said finally, my voice calm. "But it's over. I've moved on. And I'm not angry at you anymore. Just, be careful. You deserve better than someone who's willing to lie." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Emma spoke again. "Thank you. I hope you find peace." "I really do." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of closure wash over me. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't the resolution I had once dreamed of. But it was enough. It's funny how life has a way of surprising you. Just when I thought I had finally moved past the darkest parts of my story, I found myself standing on the edge of something new. Not a new relationship, not a new chapter in a romantic sense, but a new sense of who I was and who I wanted to be. I had spent so long trying to hold on to a version of myself that no longer fit. I had clung to the idea of a perfect marriage, a perfect life, because it was comfortable. But now, I was free. Free to become someone who had learned from the past without being defined by it. I didn't need anyone else to tell me who I was. I had finally realized that the only person who needed to understand me was me. The journey wasn't over. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to it with open eyes. The days that followed the call from Emma felt strangely peaceful. The lingering tension that had once dominated my life seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a quiet sense of empowerment. I hadn't expected that to be the outcome of all the pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal. But here I was, standing on my own 2 feet, stronger than I had been before. I stopped waiting for closure from Mike or Emma, or anyone else. I realized that closure wasn't something someone else could give me. It wasn't a gift or a reconciliation. It was a choice. It was something I could give myself. I had spent so much of my life defining myself by others, by my relationship, by Mike's approval, by the role I thought I should play. But now, I had nothing to prove to anyone. I was finally free to be me again. I remember one Saturday morning, I woke up early and made myself a cup of coffee. I had always shared this ritual with Mike, the small comfort of our quiet mornings together. But now, I took it as my own, a symbol of reclaiming something that was purely mine. I sat in the sunbeam that filtered through the kitchen window, letting the warmth sink into my skin. It felt like the start of a new day, a new chapter. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: I was going to face it on my own terms. The more time I spent alone, the more I realized how much I had neglected the friendships that had always been there. I had been so wrapped up in my marriage, in the illusion of perfection, that I had forgotten what it felt like to have people around me who truly understood me. People who saw me for who I really was, without the layers of compromise and obligation that had built up over the years. One afternoon, I invited Rachel over for a cup of tea. She had always been my closest friend, but we had drifted apart a bit over the last few years. I wanted to reconnect with her, to build that bond again. As we sat on the couch, sipping our tea, we talked about everything: life, work, the future. I found myself laughing for the first time in ages, without any fear or guilt. "I've missed this," Rachel said, a smile tugging at her lips. "It's so good to see you like this, Sarah. You're really coming back to yourself." And in that moment, I realized she was right. I was coming back to myself. It wasn't easy. It never is. But every laugh, every shared story, every quiet moment spent with people who truly cared, those were the things that healed me. The unexpected friendships I formed along the way, like the woman I met at the art class, or the others I met through my hobbies and activities, showed me how much I had to offer. I had been scared of trusting people again, but the truth was, it wasn't about trusting everyone. It was about trusting the right people, the ones who had proven themselves worthy of my time, my energy, and my heart. I also began to make peace with my past, specifically, with Mike. There was no denying what had happened, no pretending that our marriage hadn't ended in betrayal. But the anger, the rage that had once consumed me, started to fade. It was replaced by something far more freeing: acceptance. It wasn't about forgiving him, it was about forgiving myself. For too long, I had blamed myself. I had blamed myself for not seeing the signs, for not pushing harder, for letting things go on as they did. I had told myself I wasn't enough, that I had failed somehow. But I was wrong. I wasn't the one who had betrayed my trust. Mike had made his choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. And that meant choosing to let go of the guilt, of the anger, of everything that weighed me down. I sat down one evening, after a particularly peaceful day, and I wrote Mike a letter, not to send, but for myself. I wrote about how I felt, about everything I had learned from the experience. I didn't hold back. I poured my heart into the paper, and as I did, I realized that letting go didn't mean erasing him from my life. It meant acknowledging him for what he was, just a chapter in my story, a part of my past, but no longer a part of my future. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in a drawer, never to be opened again. It was my way of putting the past where it belonged, behind me. With the pieces of my life slowly falling into place, I began to think more about the future. The idea of starting over, of creating something new, became exciting rather than daunting. I'd spent years putting my dreams on hold, waiting for the right time, waiting for a future that had never been guaranteed. But now, I had a new perspective. I decided to go back to school, to pursue something I had always wanted to do but never had the courage for. I enrolled in a writing course, something that had always been my passion. I began to write again, not just for myself, but for the world. It was my way of reclaiming my voice, of telling my own story in a way that was honest and real. And I felt good. I felt alive. As the months went by, I kept thinking about everything I had been through. The hurt, the betrayal, the brokenness. But I also thought about the resilience, the strength, the growth. I wasn't the woman I had been when Mike and I first met. I wasn't the same woman who had stood at the altar, eyes full of hope and love, believing that nothing could tear our bond apart. I was different now. I had been tested, and I had survived. But most importantly, I had learned one crucial lesson: I was enough. I had always been enough. It was never about being perfect or pleasing anyone else. It was about being true to myself, loving myself, and knowing that I was worthy of love and respect, not because of what I gave to someone else, but because of who I was. Mike's affair had stripped away the illusions I had built around myself. It had shown me that life is fragile, that trust is earned and can be broken, but that healing is possible. And in that healing, I found a strength I didn't know I had. As I sit here today, reflecting on everything I've been through, I can't help but feel a sense of peace. It's not the kind of peace that comes from having all the answers, or from knowing that everything is perfect. It's a peace that comes from understanding that life isn't always what we expect it to be, but we can still find our way through the storm. The betrayal, the heartbreak, it was painful. It was a loss that shook me to my core. But what I've realized now, after all this time, is that those losses didn't define me. What defined me was how I chose to rise from the ashes. I could have let the hurt consume me. I could have stayed stuck in the past, blaming myself or holding on to anger. But instead, I chose to heal. I chose to forgive, not Mike, but myself. I took back my life. I took back my joy. And that, to me, was the most powerful thing I could have done. It's funny, because at the time, I thought I was losing everything. But in the end, I gained so much more than I ever expected. I found parts of myself that I thought were lost forever. I learned how to stand on my own, how to trust again, and how to let go of the things that no longer served me. So, to anyone out there who's struggling with a betrayal, a heartbreak, or a loss, know this: you are stronger than you think. The road to healing might be long, but it is worth it. Don't let the darkness of today steal the light of tomorrow. I didn't expect to find peace after everything I've been through. But here I am, and I am whole,